His lawyer leaned in and whispered 5 words. Just 5. And the look on Julian's face, that smug, self-satisfied grin I'd stared at across the breakfast table for 15 years, turned ghost white. It was the kind of pale you only see in Victorian novels or emergency room waiting rooms. His hand started to shake, just a fine tremor at first, but within seconds, the legal papers he'd been so eager to sign were rattling like dry leaves in a cold October wind. And me? For the first time in 3 long, grueling years, I let myself smile. It wasn't an oppose, a big, toothy grin, it was a slow, quiet realization of victory. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how a woman everyone in Scottsdale, Arizona, thought had lost her mind actually played the longest, most patient game of her life. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Julian Vance. 15 years of marriage. In the modern world, that's an eternity. That's longer than most Hollywood careers, longer than some tech startups last, and definitely longer than my patience should have held out. But I'm stubborn. I get that from my grandmother, a woman who grew up in the Appalachian Hills and didn't oppose, take lip from anyone, least of all a man who thought he was smarter than he actually was. I met Julian when I was 17. I was a local girl, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'd graduated high school early, not because I was some child prodigy, but because I was practical, motivated, and desperate to get out of my parents' house. I landed a job at Sterling & Associates, a mid-sized law firm, as a file clerk. It was minimum wage and maximum paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details, sharp with numbers, and I knew how to keep my mouth shut while keeping my eyes wide open. Julian was 24 when we met at a local business mixer. He was charming, ambitious, and obsessed with building a real estate empire in the booming suburbs of the Southwest. He talked about the future like he already owned it. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, until someone more important walked in. He said he was going to build something incredible. I told him I'd help him file the paperwork. Romance at its finest, right? We got married when I was 19. Our son, Leo, came along when I was 20. I kept working at the firm part-time while raising Leo, building up my 401k, and tucking away every spare dollar. My grandmother always said a woman should have her own running away money. Not secret money, she'd clarify, just her own. Something nobody could touch if the world started to burn. When I was 23, Julian's business finally took off. He asked me to quit the law firm and join him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, handle the high-maintenance clients, and coordinate with contractors, someone he could trust with his life. So, I became his unpaid everything. Bookkeeper, office manager, interior decorator for the model homes, marketing coordinator, and event planner. I did all of that while raising Leo and keeping our household running like a Swiss watch. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was the backbone. For 11 years, I poured my soul into Julian's dream. And for 11 years, he took the credit. At every gala, I was Julian's lovely wife. At every celebration, he thanked his mentors and his vision, but somehow always forgot to mention the woman who spent 12 hours a day making sure his checks didn't bounce. Somewhere along the way, the tide shifted. He started making big financial moves without telling me. He started working late 4 nights a week. He started picking at me, the way I dressed, the way I cooked, my lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free, and I wasn't ambitious enough. Then, 3 months ago, he dropped the bomb. It was a Tuesday evening in our house in Phoenix. I was making dinner, meatloaf, his favorite, because apparently, I'm a glutton for unappreciated effort. He sat me down at the kitchen island. He didn't look sad. He looked like he was about to fire a middle manager. I want a divorce, he said. And then, without blinking, I want the house, the Range Rover, the business, all of it. You can keep Leo. He talked about our 15-year-old son like he was a piece of leftover pizza. I just stared at him. 15 years, and it ended between the salt shaker and the pepper grinder. Within a week of that talk, Julian had moved me into the guest room of our own home. My walk-in closet was whittled down to 2 small suitcases. The message was loud and clear, you Don and Oppos, live here anymore. And then, he brought her around. Chloe Bennett. She was 26, a junior agent at his firm. She had that filter-to-perfection Instagram look, balayage hair, expensive leggings, and a smile that didn't and Oppos, reach her eyes. She walked into my kitchen like she'd bought the place. She even wore my grandmother's vintage apron while making kale smoothies in my blender. The humiliation was a daily ritual. Julian canceled my personal credit card, claiming we needed to separate finances. Then he cut off the joint card. Then he suggested I find an apartment because the atmosphere in the house was getting tense. My own home, and I was being evicted. His mother, Eleanor, showed up to help me pack. Eleanor had treated me like the hired help for 15 years. She patted my hand and told me I should have tried harder to keep Julian happy. Men have needs, Sarah, she said. Eleanor packed my things in heavy-duty garbage bags. Not boxes. Garbage bags. Like I was literal trash. Through all of this, I thought I had one person in my corner, Maya. We'd been best friends since high school. She was the first person I called. She'd come over with a bottle of wine, let me cry, and tell me Julian was a monster. But things started feeling off. Julian seemed to know my private thoughts before I even acted on them. If I told Maya I was thinking about contesting the house, Julian would mention it the next morning. If I told her I was looking at a specific school district for Leo, Julian would suddenly have a reason why that district was terrible. It clicked one night. I remembered how Maya's face lit up when Julian walked into a room. How she'd laugh at his dumbest jokes. She'd been carrying a torch for my husband for a decade, and Julian, who collected admirers like some people collect vintage coins, knew exactly how to use her. My best friend was his personal spy. 20 years of history betrayed for a wink and empty promises from a man who used everyone around him. But the hardest part wasn't Oppos, the cheating husband or the backstabbing friend. It was Leo. Julian was whispering in his ear every day. Your mom is being difficult, Leo. I and Oppos am trying to be fair, but she's dragging this out. Leo started pulling away from me. He was confused, and his father was a world-class salesman. I hired a lawyer, a woman named Elena Vance. She was 55, wore power suits that cost more than my car, and had the temperament of a shark. She looked at Julian's offer and scoffed. He's trying to rob you, Sarah. You built half that company. We fight for every cent. I looked at her and said, what if I Don and Oppos, want to fight for the money? Elena thought I was broken. She had no idea I was the one holding the match. People stop watching you when they think you've lost. They stop being careful. And that is exactly when they leave the door wide open. 3 years ago, I was reconciling the company's QuickBooks on a rainy Tuesday night. Julian was at a closing. I found a transfer to an offshore account I didn't and Oppos, recognize. Then another. I stayed up until 4 a.m. following the digital breadcrumbs. What I found made my blood turn to ice. Julian hadn't and Oppos, been building an empire. He'd been building a facade. Our beautiful home in the Phoenix suburbs. It had 3 mortgages on it. He'd taken out a second and a third loan to fund investments that didn't and Oppos, exist. We owed $1.2 million on a house worth barely $900,000. The business was a disaster zone. Maxed out lines of credit, $90,000 in back taxes to the IRS, and a mountain of debt to local contractors. Julian was bragging about his success at the country club while drowning in nearly 2 million. I worked with an old contact from Sterling and Associates to move my money into an irrevocable trust for Leo. My name wasn't Oppos, T on it as a beneficiary. Julian's name definitely wasn't Oppos, T on it. It was a fortress for my son's future. Then, I documented every single one of Julian's debts. Every lie, every hidden loan, every unpaid tax bill. I put the files in a safe deposit box and I waited. I waited 3 years. I smiled at the dinner parties. I played the supportive wife while watching him dig his own grave. When Julian stood in our kitchen and demanded everything, I almost laughed. He wasn't Oppos, T demanding assets. He was demanding a financial execution, and he didn't Oppos, T even know he was the one pulling the lever. I had $500,000 that was legally, safely, entirely mine. I just had to be patient enough to let him take the prize he so desperately wanted. The next few months were a masterclass in acting. I became the broken wife. I showed up to mediation with messy hair and red eyes. I spoke in a whisper. I told the mediator, I just want it to be over. Julian can have the business. He can have the house. I just want a small cash settlement to get Leo a 2-bedroom apartment near his school. Julian sat across from me, wearing a $500 silk tie, looking at me with pure pity. He thought I was a wounded animal. He agreed to my measly $50,000 settlement immediately. He probably thought he'd dodged a bullet. He started telling everyone that I didn't Oppos, T have the stomach for a real legal battle. Eleanor told her bridge club that I was too weak for her son. Chloe started redecorating my house with hideous minimalist furniture and painting my sage green kitchen a cold, clinical gray. Even Leo was starting to doubt me. He asked me one night in my tiny new apartment, "Mom, is Dad actually as successful as he says?" I looked at my son and said, "Leo, the truth has a funny way of coming out." Behind the scenes, Elena Vance was working her magic. We drafted the final agreement. It was a total asset transfer. Julian would receive all real estate, all business entities, and all vehicles. But the agreement included a standard liability assumption clause. If you take the house, you take the debt. Julian's lawyer recommended an audit. Julian shut him down. I know my business. Sarah's too dumb to hide anything anyway. He signed a waiver, legally acknowledging that he was skipping the audit against his lawyer's advice. He was so busy looking at Chloe and his new life that he didn't Oppos, T even look at the numbers. He was so arrogant that he thought he was winning, while he was actually signing up for a lifetime of debt. Thursday morning. 9 a.m. Maricopa County Courthouse. Julian walked in like he was the king of Phoenix. Chloe was waiting in the hall, and Eleanor was sitting in the back row, looking triumphant. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Sterling, looked over the agreement. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "you are giving up a multi-million-dollar business and a luxury home for a $50,000 settlement. Are you sure?" "I am, Your Honor," I said. "I just want my husband to have everything he asked for." The gavel came down. The papers were signed. It was official. That's when Rick, Julian's lawyer, finally looked at the attached liability schedule. I watched the blood drain from his face. He whispered to Julian, "Julian, we have a problem." "What problem?" Julian snapped. "I won." "No," Rick whispered. "You got $1.9 million in debt. The house is underwater. The business is bankrupt. You didn't Oppos, T just win the house, Julian. You won the foreclosure." Julian's face went from white to red to a terrifying shade of purple. He stood up, screaming that I'd tricked him. Judge Sterling didn't Oppos, T blink. "Mr. Miller, these are your signatures on the loans. You signed a waiver refusing an audit. You asked for these assets. Now they, and the debt, are yours. Case closed." I walked out of that courtroom and didn't end oppose, look back. I saw Chloe's face as she realized the millionaire she'd been dating was actually $300,000 in the hole. She was out the door before the elevator hit the lobby. 3 months later, the house was foreclosed on. The business folded. Julian is currently living in Eleanor's basement, dealing with an IRS audit. Maya tried to call me to apologize, but I blocked her number. Me? I'm in a small, sun-drenched apartment that smells like vanilla and fresh starts. My kitchen is painted a beautiful, vibrant sage green. Leo is with me, and his college fund is safe and growing. I'm finally building my own dream now. And this time, I'm the one signing the checks.